Hey there. So I've seen a lot of posts where people are asking about refleecing jobs, and I haven't seen any really good videos just from what I've looked. So I thought I'd kind of make one through this particular project. This saddle is a DW Barnes. I think it's custom made. I don't know who that is, but I'm not familiar with all of the saddle makers out there. As you know, there's a bunch. So as you can see, it's in pretty rough shape, but it's a good one to do a video for because it should be pretty typical as to how most of these saddles are put together, and you'll be able to see where all of the nails and screws and everything are. I'll try to do as good of a job videoing as I can on the teardown, and you'll have to excuse the shop. It's a mess. There's about 15,000 projects going on right now. But anyway, this is what we're going to do. I'll try to do videos along the way, getting it teardown. This one's getting a synthetic, real over synthetic, so it's not going to be a actual sheepskin, but the process is the same. So here we go. All right, so I have the phone propped up here, so I'll try to stay out of the way where you can see as best we can. But first thing I do, get all the strings and conchos off. So there's a couple of different ways. Everybody's got different ways of doing it. But what I do, I've got a peg and awl, especially these old ones where they're dry rotted. You got to be really careful. So I slide it in underneath, and then I can pull and get that to slide through, undo the blood knot. Again, there's not really any wrong way as long as they come out not broken on the end of it. And the owner here has put in these roller buckles. I'm assuming it's for attaching saddlebags, so we'll just remember to put those back when we're done. Same thing on this side. And I should point out that this particular pegging awl is a little dull on the point. So it does help from cutting into the latigo. If you have a real sharp one, that can happen. Okay. Sometimes there's a nail through the bisnet, through the little leather concho. So that's why that first one I picked up without the leather, I just took the concho off, because sometimes there is a nail in there. Once I verified there wasn't, I pulled them together. Okay. Now you can do this by hand or you can cheat like I am going to. Okay, that one does have a nail in it, and this one up here almost certainly will. Okay, same thing on the other side. Okay, just show you what we got. Got a nail here. A few nails here. Nail. And a nail. So I'll get all those up. And again, there's not really a wrong way as long as you don't damage the leather. Also too, at the base of the swells, you'll have a screw on both sides. Those will come out as well. So what I like to do is reach underneath with whatever I'm going to pry with. Now some of these, this will even come up by hand. And I always pull the nails out of the hole because we are going to be moving this leather around. And when you're moving around the seat jockeys and stuff, if you have a leather nail poking out of the bottom there, you're going to scratch up the leather elsewhere. And it's going to snag and just get in your way. This one should not come out by hand. So go grab a screwdriver and I'll be right back. Okay. Screw comes out at the base of the swell. And again, there's no right or wrong order. I do that first, just it helps when everything starts lifting. Now what I do is I reach underneath and I pry from way down here, so that way I don't damage or scar up the front of the skirts. So there's all the nails out. And same thing, you want to actually remove everything. So that way you're not scratching up your pommel. So basically what you got is you have one nail holding on the leather concho, two nails holding on the strap keeper, one more nail tacking the front of the seat jockey down. So this side's free. Repeat the process on this side. And I don't know if you can see, somebody got a little hefty with the nails here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 nails, which I think is a little excessive. But, you know, it's an old saddle, so people have probably added some nails along the way. If you just were lifting this up for, like, say, adding a breast collar, D-ring or something, then sometimes I'll just set a piece of leather behind it and leave all the nails in, and then I can reline them up. Not with that many, of course, but if there's just a couple. But it's never a bad idea to pull them. Okay. So we have our seat jockeys free, both sides. It was missing the saddle screw on the other side. You can see there's a lot of baby powder in here. So I'm going to grab the shop vac and suck all that up, or as best I can, and blow it all out before we continue. But now that this is up, we're going to pull the back jockeys off. after I get it cleaned up, I will show you that process. Okay, we're back. This saddle was never ever gonna squeak. So I got a lot of it off, but it's still not great. Oh, let's talk about what we're looking at, just so everybody gets on the same page. Fenders, leathers, lay through pocket, up over the bar, back down underneath, pretty common stuff. Talk about pulling the back jockeys. You see there'll be a nail here. There will be a nail from the bottom side, typically, that goes into the bottom of the cantle. So we'll put it on the bench and pull that. As well as there's usually some sort of attachment, a nail up here, which will be under the seat, in which case there's a couple. So when you're pulling them, you just start in the front, work your way back. You can ask 10 different saddle makers how to build a saddle and you'll get 20 different answers, because all of us do it a couple of different ways, it seems like. So no two usually are going to be exactly the same. So you just got to work your way back as to where everything is. But once we get the back jockeys off, then we will be able to see the attachments on the back. Let's talk about up here in the front what we have. We have our skirts, which will have, it's usually either a screw or a nail, depending, up here. And then there will be a series of nails that run through the gullet. And then if you come down through the hand hole, there will be a screw, typically, sometimes it's nail, but usually a screw down through the hand hole on either side. This one is super easy to see because there is no fleece, which is why, again, I thought this would be a good video. You'll be able to see everything. When I flip it over and put it on the bench, you'll be able to see that as well. So the other thing that this one does have that a lot of them will not, here's your rigging. It's a standard D rigging. You notice your, number one, you've got another layer of leather here that will unnail this. Then there will be a series of nails and screws in the rigging that goes into the tree. But the skirt itself is laced all the way through, and that comes through the bottom, and it was laced after the fleece was on. So this is not the most typical way of doing it, but that's the way this one was put together, so that's what we'll have to do. So when you open them up, you just look and see what's holding the skirts on, and that's what you remove. We're not going to have to pull the rigging off on this saddle to get the skirts off. The rigging will stay in place. What we will have to do is cut that lacing, and that will let the front of the skirt fall free. Once all the nails and everything are out, then we'll see what we have for attachments on the back, and we'll be able to pull them off. And then putting them back on, I'm just going to do it the same way it was built. So once I'm refleeced, then I will go through and I will relace the front back down. Like I said, it's not the most typical way that you will encounter, but it is a way. So while it's on the bench, before I go to the bench, while it's still on my stand, I'm going to pull the two screws from through the hand hole because I can get to them easily. And once it's upside down on my bench, it'll be harder to get to. So I'll pull those. I also am going to pull the nails in the front of the back jockeys. I will pull the nails here, see if it comes loose. Like I said, usually there's screws or nails underneath on a tab that slides under, but I don't know for sure. So I will find out after I pull all these. So here we go. There, I'm just pulling the washers off that were stuck. And I'm not sure if you'll be able to see or not what I'm doing, but we will give it a go. Like I said, I just start in the front, make sure I'm just under the back jockey. Sometimes those nails, it will tear up here. This is skived pretty thin. You don't have to lose any sleep over if you tear it there. You can put a nail next to it when you put it back together, so it's not the end of the world. We'll just remember to drive that nail in before we put it back together. Okay. Now these ones, just kind of lift. Do whatever it takes to not damage anything. Pull them apart. It's come out pretty easy. And then me personally, I'm going to use all new nails when I put this all back together. So I'm not all that concerned about what nail went where. If you are, then don't do what I'm doing and make a pile. Just maybe use some styrofoam cups or something, or throw away disposable, anything to label what's where. That's what I do when I have to put things back. But in this case, I'm going to put new nails and everything in, so it's not a big deal. So this is why I said do it before you pull it off. See there was no nails. And I don't think there's even any nails in the skirt. We'll verify that when we put it on the bench. But there you go, back jockeys are off. We'll set these to the side. Okay, now we got to look at what we got going on underneath. So we are, all right, so this is machine stitched on before the skirts were put on, which is sort of what I thought. You can see some rivets and everything in place here. Basically, the way this was assembled, once we let the front down and we pull the screws out of the back and any nails that I left there, a couple of nails here, screw there, we'll have to pull the strings out. These is an old style. Most people don't do this anymore, and I will probably retrofit it when I put it back together. The strings currently go all the way through the tree, and what that does is you're never going to break the string because it's actually, you're never going to rip it out. You'll break it before you rip it out because it is through two holes in the tree. There's two thought processes behind that. Number one, it does make a very strong saddle string, but the downside to doing it that way is that you do end up with a rather large bump underneath. You can wet it and flatten it with a hammer and get it fairly flat, but there will be a sizable bump on the bottom of your saddle. I personally don't like them that way, and so when I put this one back together, I will probably retrofit it if there's enough tree there to do it, and I will screw it down from the top side. But like I said, we'll see. Depends on if there's enough tree there to get something that I feel like is going to stay. So neither here nor there. It's all preference, what you want to do. But anyway, we'll pull the screws. And then up front, we will cut the lacing here. Again, we shouldn't have to pull the screws or pull anything off on the rigging, it doesn't look like. We'll just get the screws from inside the gullet, or the nails, I mean. And then it should slide off. So before I go to the bench, sort of the last step, while I'm here, I will pull the nails and screws for this back half. Anything I can do from the top, I do from the top before I get to the bench. It just saves me having to flip it around. So the last thing that I'll have to do on the bench should be in the handhole, and it should come off. So here we go. All right, again, I start with the screws first, because you're going to have to do some prying to get the nails. So get the screws out of the way, gives you a little more room to do that. But however you want to do it, it's perfectly acceptable. What I'm going to do is work from the front back. There we go. See them all lift up. 1, 2, 3. There's 1. There's 2, and that one might be a booger. 3. Okay, so same process on the other side. I'll pull the strings out from the bench. And you'll notice there's our nail that tore through. So just pry that one out. There's one more up here. That one may tear, may not, we'll see. And same thing, work my way back. However you can get to them works. You really don't want to tear the leather back here. If you do, you'll have to replace it. It's rigging. So it is pretty important, as you can imagine. Okay. I don't see anything else that's gonna prevent the skirts from coming off on the back. So we'll cut this lacing here. Same thing on this side. Okay. So with that, should be able to go to the bench. Okay, here we are on the bench, and again, excuse the mess. Some people have really tidy benches and can't stand anything out. It's how their brain works. Sometimes I wish that's how my brain worked, but alas, I have stuff everywhere. Anyway, here we go. Check the back. Like I thought, I'm not seeing any nails or screws in the bottom of the cannel. So all that should be left holding it on is a series of nails through the handhole. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Looks like 7 of them. There used to be one right there, would have been 8. Fell out probably who knows how long ago. I don't have a good place to prop my phone on the bench, so I'm going to try to do this one-handed. Grab a piece of scrap leather, sorry guys, to protect the gullet cover. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. Let me see if I can figure out how to place to put the phone. Okay, so the angle's weird, but it's the best I can do. Piece of leather in, protect against prying. I keep a couple of scraps laying around just for this purpose. I think it's a good practice to have a few. If there is fleece still left on the bottom, a really good trick is to use a magnet, and it will help you find all of these nails and screws and such if you're unsure where they are. Okay, and again, I'll use all new hardware for that. Fronts are clear. Don't know if you can see that or not, but fronts are free. So if I've got everything off the back, which I'm still only sort of sure that I do, then once I pull the saddle strings out of the way, the skirts should come off. I should point out that this is a good opportunity to ask your customers if they would like new saddle strings, because they're off anyway, and it makes your life easier to put them on. if they're new, than to reuse old ones a lot of the time. Okay, voila. So there's your bars. Notice I never pulled the fenders, never pulled the stirrups off. There's no need. During the build, you will have those on before you put your skirts on anyway. So there's not really a need to wrestle those off of there. You can if you want to. Again, it's just time for me. But I would recommend, if you do take them off, to put them back on before you put your skirts on. Otherwise, you're going to have to wrestle them back around the bars after your skirts are in the way. So, again, there was no nails at all or anything into the bottom of the cannel. So, on future ones, if you're following along on this, you may find some screw or nail here. It's pretty typical for there to be. So to remove this lacing, I'm just going to cut it. I probably will not do a real detailed video on lacing it back together. There's lots of videos out there. There's lots of different ways. So, and again, it will make the video this longer, so I'm going to probably just show you before I do it and then show you when I'm done, just to save on time on this. Boy, this is hard one-handed. And then, like most people will do, they will actually just lace it with some wax thread and extra a couple of times across just to hold it together before they actually do their finish lacing. It helps keep everything in place so your skirts stay lined up. Cut that. And then, yeah, you'll see under here there's usually one further back. In this case there is. That one's cut. Voila. 2 skirts. You can see here where mistakes were made. If you notice, the side doesn't have it. This side does, which is fine. It's all going to get covered up anyway. It is odd that it's done the way it is. I don't know if that was a nice knife slip or what, but once we get the rest of this sheepskin off, we will have a better idea. I don't know how far up that goes, but it doesn't go all the way to the front. Just see, nobody's perfect. And I would imagine he probably would have had to get a whole nother piece sheepskin, and he chose not to. So we just laced it back together and glued it down. You can see there's no split in the actual skirting. It looks like it's just in the sheepskin. So, 'tis saddle building. Okay, next step. We'll get this lace out of the way. I'll have to grab a pair of pliers, probably pull it all out. Maybe I can get it by hand. Then I'll go around the skirt. We have to cut all the stitching all the way around, and as we're lifting the sheepskin. So I will move the rest of the saddle out of the way, put it back on the bench, try to prop the phone up, and we'll do that process. Okay, before I do that, also too, like I said, I'm going to remove the back billets. It's got 2 different ones on there. This one obviously just slips over. That one's easy. This side is laced. There's no way I'm going to be able to get that apart and reuse that lace. So if you don't know how to lace it in this style and you want it put back together the same way, find the end, take it apart, video yourself doing it, take notes, and then you'll be able to put it back together. I will just cut it because like I said, I'm going to reuse, or not reuse that piece. I'll use a new piece of Latigo. So I'll get these off and then we'll keep going. Okay. So I won't video the whole thing, but I'll show you where to start. Find a corner somewhere it's going to lift. You'll see multiple layers here. So there's a seam right here. You can see through the burnishing just barely. So you have the top side of your skirt, bottom skirt, and then this is the sheepskin with a fresh blade, which I forgot to change. Work your way in. It is going to be glued down. It is not fun to get up. Sometimes we get lucky and they just peel, but not every time. Underneath. Important thing is don't mutilate the skirt. There, now let's see it starting to come up. So you get the process, go all the way around, cut and peel, both skirts. Okay, another trick, slide screwdriver down through and pry up on the leather. If you're having, you can see where I've had a couple of slices there. I just couldn't get it to cut the stitching because it was glued too tight behind the stitching. So you can take a screwdriver, slide it into the hole. I'll do a little bit so you can see. Okay, we're glued here. Sliding it down, basically creating a pocket, lifting it up with the screwdriver. That will just make cutting your stitching easier because as you're lifting it will separate and you'll be able to just cut the stitching without getting into the skirting. So now that I've done that, grab my treble spot here. You can see how much better that's working. I didn't get down there very good, so now I'm having trouble again. Same thing. Okay, now I go back to it. Okay, you get the idea. Okay, it's off. I could lie to you all and say it took me 5 minutes, but it was a little longer than that. Anyway, here we go. Now, the way this particular skirt was put together, there were basically shims placed all the way around to thicken up, as opposed to doing just a bottom skirt pattern. Again, sometimes you do see them done this way, but that makes getting the sheepskin off more challenging usually because you end up with all these overlapped seams and everything is skived down. So on this side, I actually had the glue not separate and got underneath it. So I had to remove that whole piece, which isn't the end of the world. It just means now that I get to put a new piece in, because obviously that is not thick enough for the front of the skirt. So a little bit more work, but I will basically replicate it, what's over here. Add a panel, skive it down before I glue it in. I'll leave it long, and then I will take my knife and trim it off to make sure that I actually get the right fit. Do not try to pattern this out, like lay it down on a piece of leather, trace it and glue it in, because I guarantee you will miss. So what you do is you make it big where it hangs over, and then on your inside you can cut that, because it's a little bit arbitrary where it's cut. It's just a guideline, just to the inside of the holes where it was laced. And then you can skive that down on your granite, glue it all in with it overhanging, and then flip it over, cut it off exactly to fit, and then refinish your edge and you'll be ready to go. So I will get that in, and then we will lay these out on our synthetic fleece, trace them out, and we'll go through that process. The other thing that I probably will do that I won't necessarily show you because it's super tedious is on the front side. I now get to pull all the stitching. So that will be fun. And there is a wear guard on here that I just noticed after I flipped it over that was not sewn in. It was sewn in after. So you have two choices. Lift it up, trim it off, re-glue it back down, or stitch it back in place over the top. Really, in my mind, the correct way is to lift it off, so that's the way I do them. I take them off, I'll sew everything back on, and then I will glue them down and then re-sew the wear guard on onto the top. Again, it's more work, but in my mind, it just looks more correct. Another way to do it, if you're worried about hitting the holes again, is to lift it up, glue it all down, and then basically roll the skirt and put it through your machine, pulling it back. So actually I will try to lift this up. We'll see what it looks like, and then make a determination if I'm going to cut that top stitching or not. So anyway, that's where we are. And when I come back, all the stitching will be out of here. I will have decided what I'm doing on this wear guard, whether I'm going to lift it up and stitch around it, or if I'm going to just pull it off and put it back on. And I also will put this new bolstering panel in on this side here. Actually, I'm on the wrong side. On this side where I had to cut it out, pulling the sheepskin. I will be back. Okay, so all of the stitching is out. I picked these up, these wear guards here, and I'm going to be able to just lift them up, I think, and get them through my machine, so that's what I'm going to do. But they are prepped, they're ready. Let's see, which one of these? Right here's the repair. New pieces in, skive down to 0 along this inside edge, full thickness on the outside edge, edge is refinished, blends in pretty well. I might hit it with another layer of edge dye here when I'm all done. We shall see. Okay, next up. Remember I said this is the real over synthetic, so it's a big roll. It's obviously different than how you'll do it with real fleece. It's the same procedure, just you won't have the luxury of a gigantic square. You can lay them on here any way you want with this. So what I'm going to do, just like how I did that repair, I'm going to trace around them larger than what they actually need to be. And then we'll glue them down, and then we'll go back through and make our final cuts. Don't try to cut them out exactly to fit before you glue them down. It will not end well. So let me pause this. I'll get everything traced out, and then I will show you what that looks like. Okay, traced out. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just bigger than what you're going for. Okay, I'll get this cut out and I'll show you next step. Okay, here we go. So you see they're cut out. Just used my knife. Cut them from the back side. And again, remember, this is the synthetic backing. Now, I do keep my scraps even of the synthetic stuff because it is real wool on the other side. It's just synthetic backing. So I'll take and shave all that wool off of this backing, and it goes good in your buck and rolls or whatever you're going to make. Anything padding wise that you need to stuff, it's really good for that. So next step, we're going to glue all this down. So the way you do that is you're always going to apply your contact cement to your leather side first. When you apply to either the synthetic fleece or to real sheepskin, it will set up faster on your sheepskin. So I always put it on my skirt first, and then I apply it to my sheepskin, and usually as soon as I can get it laid down, the glue down, it's pretty much ready to go on. So I don't have a good place to prop the phone up, so I'm going to talk you through the process, because once there's glue on here, I will need 2 hands. When you lay this on, the skirt has already been formed. It's not even remotely flat. So you have to carefully lay it down and walk it over. So glue's on. We'll pretend glue's on. I set my flatter side down, which usually is the bottom. And then I will depress without sitting the top down. I will push in with my hand here where it's raised. I will push that down while holding the top up, and that will allow it to make contact and walk your way to the top of the skirt. That will prevent you from getting it stuck down up top and then having it be too tight that you can't get it to make contact in the middle. With this synthetic stuff, it is a synthetic backing. It's more forgiving than that regard because it does stretch a little. But if you're using real sheepskin, that the skin itself isn't going to stretch quite the same. So you want to make sure that you actually get it down into all of these crevices nice and tight. So again, I start at the bottom and I walk it to the top, following all the contours. And then also don't forget, you'll have your little ear up here that you push it down in there really good too and get it good and stuck. Okay, when I come back, both of these will be stuck down and we'll be ready to trim. Okay, here we go. As promised, all glued down. You can see there, and pressed. I don't know how well you can see it. I laid it all flat this way once I got it initially stuck, and then pressed it all down and good. Flipped it over, and then ran my hand pressing down into all of the contours, making sure that I had good contact and adhesion all the way through. My edges are all stuck really well. So that was a good to go. Next step, we're going to leave it long and we're going to sew it. And then once it's all sewn down, then we will go through and make our final trim. So when you're sewing these, anytime you're doing any leather repair, you need to make sure that you go into and reuse the old stitch holes. If you don't reuse them, you will perforate the edge and then the whole thing will come apart. So what I do is on both tops, this is just in general, I always start up here because this will be hidden. There will be no overlapping. So I'll start sewing up here. Don't worry about doing a back lock stitch because when you come back around and finish, you're going to sew right over where you started and lock it. So I'll start up here. I'll use the first couple of holes to get my stitch length set on my machine to match this stitch length. And then I will sew the whole thing all the way around. And then when I get back up here, I will go over it 3 or 4 stitches past where I started and lock it that way. I'll do that on both. And then when I come back, they'll be stitched up and we will make our final trims. After it's trimmed, we're going to line these up and we're going to lace them together. We'll tie them together with some wax thread and then we're going to lace them together on the bench, and that way when they go on the saddle, they're already laced, ready to go. All right, I'll be back. Okay, so I got one finished up and one not, so you can see the difference. Basically, just trim it out all the way around and then take some scissors. You need to get some better shears, but these ones work. And you're just going to go along the edge like so and bevel the edge where it hangs over. I will maybe show you after I cut the next one out before I hit it with the shears so you can see what I'm talking about. But that's what your finished product should look like. All right, just a minute, I will pause this, and once I get the other one cut out, I'll show you before I trim it with the shears. Okay, so here's what it looks like before you trim it with the shears. So you can see the stitch line. Basically what you're trying to do is trim all this fuzz off that's going to hang over. That's what it looked like on the top. So yeah, it's not really what we want. It's not clean. It's not a finished edge. What we want it to look like is something like that. All right, so I will get this done. Then we got to glue. I'll probably just do it, so I'll talk about it now. We're going to glue these wear guards back down on both of them. Like I said, I was able just to hold it up and stitch underneath it without having to pull the stitching, so that's going to save me a little bit. But I do have to glue them back down. Once they're glued down, then the next step is going to be to punch the holes. These 4 holes on each side. And then I will lace that together. So then our skirts, I'll tie them with some wax thread. Get them lined up. Lace them together. And then I also, while I'm here, I'm going to punch the holes through where the saddle strings are going to go. So I got to punch holes through the fleece for those as well. And then it will be ready to slide back on. We'll get the back attached and then lace down the front. So next time I bring the video back up, I probably will have the holes done and I will have this laced and the wear guards glued back down. So again, when you're lacing your skirts back together, put them on the bench. Sometimes it helps to elevate them, so I'll find anything tall or about the right height. Sometimes it's my drill or whatever. It just depends on what it is. Let me try to show you. So here's a drill battery. That might be tall enough. Excuse the camera for a second. All right, there. So once they are wax thread tied together, picking it up will bring it more to its natural curve that it wants to be at, and that will help make sure you get this straight and tight. When you lace these back together, you need to make sure that when you start your lacing and when you tie it with your wax thread, that your ends line up, that you're not offset like that. If you're offset and you lace it, it will stay offset. When you go to put it back together on the saddle, it won't fit right, and visually it just won't look right. So you need to make sure that your skirts are lined up perfectly when you tighten that and tie down that lace thread, or that wax thread, I mean. When you do the wax thread, you just go through your stitch holes here. You don't, see there, you can see the outline of the X. You don't make new holes, you're going to use the existing stitch holes. And tie it together, suck it down really tight, and then you can lace it. Like I said, I'm not going to make the video on lacing. There's a lot out there. There's lots of different lacing styles and types, and there's books and all that. As well as I know there's some really good stuff already on YouTube for some other guys on how to do this lacing on this back of the skirt. But I will get it put together, and then like I said, when we come back, it'll be ready to go back on the saddle. Okay, so we've got wear guards glued down, lacing done, so it's ready to go back together. Hard part's over with. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take it to the saddle, which is on the stand. I will try to set the camera up so you can watch me do it, but we're going to run these pockets into the back of the tree, and then get it all lined up, and then we will run the screws and the nails down on the back, get the back locked in place, and then we will tack down the front. We'll probably lace it first. Like I said, this isn't how I usually put my skirts together. So either we'll throw a couple of nails up here to hold it in place and then lace it, or we'll lace it depending on what it looks like once we get it on there. So here we go. Okay, so it gets to make it pretty easy. We know whether or not we've got it in the right spot because all the old screw holes and everything are there. So I will reuse some of the screws. There's nothing wrong with those. And I'm just going to make sure that I get the old screw hole. That will guarantee that we are in the same spot. Before I go any further, we'll do the other side. Okay. Now we'll throw some nails in it. Okay, now we'll throw the nails in it. Problem when you're using old stuff. Here we go. New nails, old holes. Check every nail you put in and make sure that you don't go too far. I'm hitting something. Okay. Again, I'll say this is not how I usually attach my rigging. I'm just going with what the original builder did. If I think it's just not adequate, you know, you can always adjust it, but you know, like I said, even though it's not the way I do it, it's held together for all these years, so I'm okay putting it back the way it was. Okay. So pick all this old lace out of here. And I will say again, this is not how they normally are. Normally they're not laced, or at least in all the ones I've done, they're not typically this way. But that's okay. It's not like it's impossible. All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to lace this together in the front first. to help make sure that it goes back where it was supposed to be, or it was originally. And then I will go in and I'll drive new nails in the gullet, and then we will put in the 2 screws, one on either side of the handhold. So I will stop the video here. I will get these laced together, and then we'll take it to the bench, get the nails in the bottom, and then put the 2 through the handhole, and then finish putting it back together. Okay, so we're laced together, both fronts, skirts back on where it's supposed to be. So now we're going to run the nails into the gullet. Try to use the old nail hole where you can for these ones up here in the right in the corners where the gullet meets the bar. You got a nail that goes through on both sides. That's what makes this point and keeps it pulled back. I always try to reuse those holes. Just kind of helps make sure that the skirt's back on where it started. The ones underneath are less critical. So what I do is I just pull it down, kind of push a nail through, and mark it with my thumb. Approximately where it's at, and I usually can find it. And like I said, it's not the end of the world if you don't reuse this hole, but I find that reusing that hole helps make sure that the skirt is square and on there straight. This is awkward because I'm trying to get it to where the camera can see it here. I'm trying to see, maybe if I go like this, you can see what I'm doing. Alright, put one more in here. Okay, so now we're going to put the screws in the little ears down inside the handhole. Now if you notice on this particular drill, I've got this bit with this slide on it. What this will do is I will slide it all the way down like that, and it will hold the fleece out of the way so the fleece doesn't wrap around the bit. If you don't have that, when you try to put this one in, that you will probably have a problem. So you want to get something with a guard on it where you can pull this around it and keep it tight. And I don't know if you're going to be able to see what I'm doing, so you'll just have to watch. But once I get it in here, I will show you. Okay. See there? Down tight inside the handhole. So we'll do the same thing on this other side. And again, you're gonna want something that will hold that screw for you tight against that fleece. Otherwise, the Phillips bit will wrap around. So verify where that other hole was. Pull it down tight. Voila. Okay. Screws are in. Both sides. So now we got to put the back jockeys back on. So just get my phone set up in my perch. The way those go on, they have ears here, so you just hook one side, pull the other, and then it'll guide down in there. And then we'll nail this down up top. Yep. Nobody's perfect, right? I could edit that out, but it'll happen to one of you two, so we'll probably go ahead and leave it in. There we go. Okay. Now we got our back jockeys are on. Got to put our strings back in. Two more nails. Got one that goes right here. Just check and make sure that didn't have a nail go where it wasn't supposed to. Okay, the best way that I know to get these through is just take your peg and awl. Poke your holes where they go. And go from underneath. And again, usually I do this on the bench, but I'm trying to do it over here where we can actually see. Okay, so I spared all of you the bore of watching me wrestle this other string back through, but they're on. Once they're through, leather conchos, metal conchos, this particular one, they have these roller buckles in, blood knots. Simple as that. Back of the saddle is wrapped up. So all that we have left to do is work our way forward. So it doesn't really matter the order at this point because it's going to go together fairly smoothly. Got all the old holes already. It's not on a new build. When you're setting everything on a rebuild like this, you're just putting it all back. So again, you can do them by hand, of course. This just speeds it up. Now I don't have any of these old flathead brass saddle screws, so I'm going to grab two new screws and washers. To replace these old ones because one was missing. Otherwise, I would have just put them back. Voila. Now, if you recall, there was 900 nails in the Latigo keeper. So some of them are bent. Just pull all of them. Now you do want to make sure that you've got at least one or two nails into this before you put the concho over it, because it will take weight, people hanging their latigos. So one thing that I do is I identify this hole where the screw is going to go in for the concho. And then I take that and go all the way through with an awl. Just to ensure that that screw hole lines up when we're all done. Okay, now same thing. I think that amount of nails is a little excessive, like I said before, but we'll just go with it. It's also important to note that your latigo keeper is on your on side and your cinch hanger is on your off side. When you're done, that should be that way. Okay. Okay, two things I forgot to point out. Number one, before you lace this, you actually have to trim out around where the holes are. So from the center of the skirt out past the hole, you will trim that just like you do around. I forgot to mention that. And then the other thing I forgot to mention was when you do put strings through the bottom like this, you have to make sure to take a hammer to them and flatten that out. And also same thing with this lacing. Once it's all laced up on top, before you put it on the saddle, I set my anvil on it with it on the bench, and then from the top side I use my rubber mallet and I hammer them down, and that helps lock all the lacing. So three things I forgot to mention in the process. I wanted to make sure that it didn't get forgotten. Okay, there you have it. It's all back together. Sorry for the weird editing that will probably be happening. Starts and stops through this whole process, but it's back together. We'll put the back billets back on it and send it out the door. I hope this helps somebody. Like I said, I didn't see a whole lot out there, so somebody's going to tackle this project. Remember that though they are a little different, all of them, how the skirts go on, but as long as you're paying attention to how you take it apart, that's all there is to it. All right, take care, guys.